The Fear. Quite a dramatic title, but there's quite a dramatic story that goes along with it. And it's jumping into REST APIs with Azure Cognitive Services and Power Automate. You know my background, I'm not a pro dev. I know a lot of concepts, and I can kind of put together a plugin within Dynamics 365. So this is my story of facing what I call the fear and learning not to be scared of pro dev terminology. And I'm trying to encourage people that have got the tools to do the same. Brief intro from me. A lot of you know who I am already. I'm Paddy BYRNE. My website's freefall365.com, and you can get me on LinkedIn, freefall365, at PaddyFreefall on Twitter, and you can get me on YouTube at youtube.freefall365.com. It's freefall365 because I'm a skydiver, and this has got a bit of a skydiving theme to the intro and the story as well. So I have to put up humour me. Again, continuing intros, I'm a Power Platform functional consultant for a partner based in Bells Hill called KIC ICT Limited. And I'm part of the admin team at the Virtual Power Group. And as part of that role, I run free Power Apps night classes. And those classes are aimed at, again, they're aimed at beginners, people getting new to the Power Platform, but I try and tailor them a wee bit so that there's something in it for everybody as well. And I try and prompt a wee bit of discussion as well, so you get a lot of my own opinions in there. I'm a massive wrestling fan, and before MD says anything, I always start off my sessions with, it's not fake, it's predetermined. Absolutely not fake. Everybody says wrestling's fake, don't you know it's fake? It's not fake, it's predetermined. And I've no fancy stats with wrestling, I just watch loads of it and love it. And I'm also a skydiver in my spare time. I've got almost 100 licensed jumps, not as much as I would hope for now. COVID's actually, you know, put a bit of a stop on that as well. And I'm currently training on formation skydiving. So I've done loads of formation skydiving, but I'm not very good at it yet. I'm not the most elegant formation skydiver. I'd love to do more of that going forward. Tonight's session, as I said, we're going to really, the goal is to shine a light on these two amazing tools, in particular this one here, which is the logo for Azure Cognitive Services. I want to try and encourage MD, if you've not played with it before or used it before, or maybe you shy away from it because it sounds a bit technical, to just have a go, really. And I hope you come away from this session with some encouragement to try that. And in order to tell you and encourage you to use these tools, I'm going to tell you a story. How I was introduced to Azure Cognitive Services. There's loads of skydiving analogies in there as well. And how I went about learning how to use REST APIs by implementing a solution involving the batch transcription service. So the batch transcription service is part of the speech to text service. And so it converts large volumes of text, so large volumes of audio to text. And I'll also talk about how I overcame what I refer to now as the fear. And we'll start with the beginning. When I was a kid growing up in my teens, probably right into my teens actually, I always wanted to be, only wanted to be two things. I wanted to be a stuntman or a computer programmer. And the reason I wanted to be a stuntman is because I envied the confidence that stuntmen seemed to have. I was very much an introvert, I still am very much an introvert. And to see these guys just looking cool and how they attract those difficult situations with coolness and calmness, really, I really wanted to be like that. And I wanted to be a programmer because I loved solving, problem solving. I was good with problem solving skills, and I like the creativity that programmers seem to have in coming up with these nice solutions. But at the time, I came up with loads of excuses why I didn't pursue these ambitions. I didn't like driving, so I was stuntman out. And although I was good at problem solving, I just didn't quite get the hang of coding. But if I'm honest, it was fear that kept me back from both of those dreams. And it was fear of wasting time, fear of the unknown, and above all, failing that kept me back. So I became a Dynamics 365 consultant, and that satisfied my thirst for creativity and solving problems. And in 2015, I decided to try my hand at skydiving. which is probably as close to being a stuntman as I'm going to get. I did a tandem skydive and I absolutely loved it, got hooked on it, and I wanted more. And one of the instructor, the tandem instructor that did the skydiving with me, said, you know, you can just enroll and do it. You can learn how to do this. Anybody can do this. And I was like, really? What, anybody can just pay for a course and become a skydiver? And I was like, yeah. So that's what I did. I enrolled in a course and became a skydiver. And like I said, it was part of overcoming that kind of fear of starting something and failing. But then someone just pointed me in the right direction, and off I went to do it. So I booked a flight to Seville, and I went to become a skydiver. And it went really easy. It was an intense skydiving course I went on. First 3 days, did 8 supervised jumps, and that was me. I could jump solo then, and turns out I was really good at just falling. It was a sport that I was really good at, just going limp and falling out the airplane. And if you look at me here with my certificate and my license documents, I've started to get a bit cocky. And then on the 4th day, I was heading up on the plane, and all of a sudden it hit me. It was the fear. And I absolutely, for some reason, whatever was wrong that day, on the way up on the plane, my mind just started racing all over the place. I tried to find any excuse not to get out the plane. And every excuse I answered with, like, come on, you've done this before. It was easy. It's good, great fun. The end of the excuse, it just was, I can't do this. And I didn't do it. I ended up going down with the plane, doing the walk of shame back to the hangar. And at that moment, I thought, oh man, my skydiving, all that money spent, all that training to become a skydiver, my skydiving career is over. That was for nothing. So jump forward to January 2019, and a wee bit of a different story. It was Dynamics 365 Glasgow. I just attended a session by Dave Burrell, who is one of the members of the group. You probably know Dave. And in this session, he introduced us to Azure Cognitive Services. And he demonstrated how you could use Flow, that was Flow at the time, to translate emails in Dynamics 365 as they were created. So it was a flow that ran on the creation of an email, activated the email, it translated the English text into Spanish, and it populated another text field on the email activity with the translation. I was blown away by this. This was like wizardry. And I was like, you know what? It was the same as my first tandem skydive. It was like someone showed me that this kind of cool stuff is possible without being a pro coder. All of a sudden, this kind of dream was within reach for me. And so, roll on kind of December 2019, and Flow had been rebranded to Power Automate, and I was starting to get grips with it again, trying to get grips with it a bit more, and started doing really just not as much integration stuff, but doing some small integrations, but also doing a lot of kind of replacing the Dynamics 365 classic workflows. But the point I'm getting to is I started getting confident and cocky again, just like what I was like when I'd got my skydiving license. And then a requirement rose for one of our existing customers, and they had some software, telephony software, that recorded phone calls and stored them in Azure Blob Storage. And I had a wee look and I thought, that's great. So they wanted to transcribe them to text files. So I kind of, being cocky and knowing the most about Flow in the organisation, was like, I reckon I could do that. Of course, next thing you know, it was quoted, sold and scheduled, and there's a fast approaching deadline. And so I started looking at how to do it, because obviously I was hit with this deadline, and I started coming up against some terms that I'm familiar with, but only in familiarity as in probably get a developer resource to look at that. And there were things like REST API and endpoints and JSON and repositories. All the sample code was in GitHub repositories, and again I started recognizing a feeling. I started making excuses to myself, and I recognized that I had the fear again. And it was different because it crept up on me this time. It didn't just hit me like it did in the plane. It crept up me when I was at my desk, but it was the same thing. My brain and my mind started making excuses, and in the end I was like, I can't do this. I was despairing. The deadline was approaching. I hadn't even got anywhere. And then I thought back again. This time I recognised what it was, and I thought back to what my skydiving instructor told me the day after the plane incident, and explained that anything, you can overcome anything. He says the reason you didn't get out of the plane is because of the fear. And it says there's 3 things to overcome any sort of fear. First, you need to assure yourself that you have the right tools to conquer it. And in the case of skydiving, I've got a parachute. You know what I mean? And I've got an automatic deployment device. So worst comes to the worst, if I freak out and freeze, I've got a parachute over my head and I can land it. I've done it before. Secondly, have a backup plan. And the backup plan again with skydiving was I've got a reserve. So again, even if my first parachute fails, I've got a reserve which will automatically deploy it and save me. And lastly, it was to break the problem down into smaller steps. And again, in skydiving, it was, and I'll try to get out the plane, it was stand up, walk towards the door, jump. And as long as you pull after you jump, pull your chute after you jump, you'll be fine. And that's kind of what we're going to look at today, because it is the same for any sort of fear. And fear, again, it may approach you differently, but it's the same thing. Your mind starts making excuses to why you not do it, and you come up with reasons why not to do it. But if you break that problem down, you assure yourself you've got the right tools and you've got reserves, then you can overcome it. And so I'm going to look at how I did that using the batch transcription service, speech to text, and we're going to build a flow. So if I just minimize this now, and I'll start off by showing you again, I'm going to just take you through my steps on how I built this flow and how I used it. And I'll talk about how you can apply the same sort of methodology of using Power Automate and some tools within Power Automate to pretty much use any REST API. So again, give me a second. So where I started off was what is batch transcription. So it's Azure Cognitive Services site, and there's a thing, watch batch transcription. There's a few different text, speech to text. I keep getting it mixed up. Speech to text services. There's a few that do real time, and it's for short clips. And the one that I'm looking for was the batch transcription, because I was looking for longer clips. The audio files the audio files that we were using were about 7 to 15 minutes long. And the documentation on the Azure Cognitive Services website, the Microsoft website, is very, very clear. It's actually changed. It's actually less clear than it was. It's actually changed because it used to just give you the 4 steps, and those steps were actually in order of what you have to do to use the transcription service. But if you look here, you've got these different calls to these URLs and what they do. And another thing it gives you, and again, this is me coming from a not pro dev background, but I've got this Swagger document here, and if I open that up, this was an excellent tool for me because it tells you what each of the speech to text API calls does. And if you're not familiar with cognitive services, a brief summary is that it's a collection of tools. It's an SDK and a collection of REST APIs that you can utilize to make intelligent apps and add AI to your apps without being a data scientist. But this Swagger document here that you get straight from the Azure Cognitive Services website, it tells you all the different calls and it gives you examples. So if I used to Control F, and we'll look for transcription, there's one, create transcription. It tells you your endpoint, it tells you what headers you need, and it gives you some sample code. So I mean, that is invaluable in me learning how to use this service. And again, if we go back to our documentation, it also tells you what you need beforehand. So you need a subscription key, and you need, if we scroll down, a file, which is MP3. That's easy. I've got a file there. And again, this was all the stuff that I was terrified of, because as soon as I see that, I think that looks very developed, pro dev, that. And the other key bit is the storage. So it's Azure Blob Storage. So that was fine for my use. If you weren't using the Azure Blob Storage already, then you'd have to find a way to transport it over there. But it works off Azure Blob Storage. So the first thing that we need to do is get a subscription key. And you do that by going into Azure and setting up a cognitive services endpoint. And again, I was quite very new to Azure at the time here, so I only really knew Azure Active Directory. I knew it did loads of things, but again, it was unfamiliar territory for me. Just do that, and but it turned out it was actually quite easy to do, to set up a service, and to do that you just click create a resource. Now the only catch is if you do a search for speech, I think it's a speech to text, there's one of them that comes up. Yeah, if you do a search for speech to text, which is what we want to use, you get this other product, a third-party product. So if you just search for speech, and you get the right one. So we've got the speech one, and you click create. And the location is really important because you're going to use that in your endpoint URL. We're going to use UK South. And again, another important thing to note here is the pricing tier. You can set up an Azure trial environment and you get 150, I think it's about $150 or pounds worth of credit, but you need to have a subscription to use this speech to text service. Although you can set up I think if I remember right, you can set up a trial, and although if you put it on your paid subscription, it will use your Azure credit, so it's not going to charge you. I mean, the cost of doing this to try it out is minimal anyway. But you do have to actually add your credit card details and have an active subscription to try it. You can't just do it under the trial. And then choose a resource group. And if we click create, let's give it a name. What have we got here? That goes off and creates a resource. And that's it, done. Now you can browse to your resource. So again, we're just really following the manual here. And the details on how to do that is in the Get Started guide. So now that we've got a resource, we can look at keys, and we can copy our keys for there. And I'm just going to copy that key and put it over to my other screen. And again, another important thing here is this endpoint, and we'll copy that as well. So the next thing we need is blob storage. I'm not going to get into how to create blob storage, but you can. It's much the same as creating a resource within Azure, and then you download this. For our trials, we'll download the Microsoft Azure Storage Explorer, which allows you to explore blob storage and upload and delete and modify files in blob storage. And then we need a file. So as a file, I'm going to use for this example a Bret Hart promo that I've took the audio from, because again, I'm a big wrestling fan, and wrestling promos work really well when you're doing Azure. It's converting AI. We're using AI with Azure because they're very clear and they're very short as well. So you can, and they're American, so it always seems to predict the audio really well. It comes out with really good results. So we've got a Bret Hart promo, and what we'll do, we'll upload that to Azure Blob Storage once we build our flow. So that's us got our prerequisites. We've got our file, our blob storage, and we have a subscription key. Let's go to our flow and start building it. So we'll click new flow. And give it a name. And for a trigger, we will do a search for blob storage. And I was just kind of finding this out. The first thing I always do is check whether there's a connector for it. Unfortunately, there wasn't one for the batch transcription file, but this Azure Blob Storage trigger has when a blob is added or modified property, and then you can browse to your blob. And the next step, now this was one of the parts where I knew how to get a URL, but I didn't know how to authenticate. And this is when I had a backup plan. My reserve in this scenario is the community. There's a massive community out there, so I know I've got backup in case I get stuck or despair and I get the fear and I give up again. So I reached out to the community to find out what I needed to get to the blob storage, and they came back with the answer. And again, it's in the Azure blob storage action. And what you need to do is you need to get a SAS URI, and that'll allow, using this URI, that'll allow you to access the blob storage from your flow. And we've got this path from the response from our trigger. And I think that's all we need. Then what I'll do, I'll put my subscription key in a variable, because we're going to use that throughout the flow. Let's just put it in there. And the next step, we need to create a transcription. Now again, there was no connector for the Azure BAT speech to text. So you have to use a tool called the HTTP action, HTTP request. And that allows you to send requests to REST APIs and handle those as well, and deal with the response. So we're going to create the transcription. And if we look at our Swagger document, which is there, create transcription, this tells you exactly what you need to do. You actually don't need the contact type as a header either. So the first thing we'll do is, it's a post request. And URI is the one with our endpoint. If I take it, and then you can just again copy directly from the Swagger document here. Oops. So that's the URI we need to hit. We'll add our headers. You don't need the contact one. I'd probably say it causes more trouble than it's worth. And for the body, again, it's directly in that Swagger document. You can just take the sample from there. Paste it in. For the content URLs, that's the URI to the blob that we got earlier. And it's this web URL one. So we can just add that in. And we'll give it a name. And I'll give it the file name. And I always put the time on it as well, just to make it a bit unique. You don't need to, but you can. And that's all we need to create the transcription. Before we go into that flow. Remember I spoke about breaking things down into smaller pieces. So what I'll do there, I'm just going to do a compose here because I want to have a look at the response to see what happens here and what can I get back from that action. And the easiest way to do that is, again, another tool in our toolkit is this compose action. And we'll put the body in there. Click save. And we'll test this, and we'll upload the file to the blob storage and do a test. So a Bret Hart promo, and we'll just put that over there. I've noticed when you test this, it takes quite a while to recognize the trigger, and sometimes it doesn't recognize it through a test at all. So we'll hit refresh a few times. There we go. So let's have a look at what we get out of that. And that's what we get here. And again, another tool that's in our toolkit is VS Code. So if I create a new file here, and I'm going to save that as JSON. So it's all formatted nice for us. We'll paste the response, and that shows us what we get. So this is the URL of our transcription that we've created in Azure Cognitive Services. So that's quite key, that self property. We've got two channels, one's for stereo and one's for, so one's for left, one's for right, because we're using stereo. And importantly, you've got the status here. Notice that it's not started. And that's because, again, if you go back to the documentation, the transcription service is asynchronous. So you're going to have to poll that to look to see what status is, and hopefully eventually you'll get it as completed. So now that we know what we're going to expect back, how do we deal with that response? And then again, check that transcription status. Well, use another tool within Power Automate, and it is the parse JSON action. Now, once you learn how to use these tools, compose, parse JSON, and the HTTP request actions, you find you use them all the time. So let's parse the JSON, the response, the body of this create transcription. I saved that file, or copied that file into, that response into a file for a reason, because you need to specify the schema here. Rather than specify it, because like I said, I'm not, this code kind of scares me. I get the fear when I look at things as codey as this, but I can generate it from a sample, and the sample that we're going to use is the output or other action. And if I click done, it generates this sample here. And then it means that when we go into the next step, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to initialize a transcription status variable, because that's what we're going to check to see if it's completed. Oops. That'll be a string. And again, these properties here are all the nodes that are in our JSON. So we should have a status one. And that's it there. We can get rid of this, get rid of this compose for now. So that says we're going to check the status, and we'll put our if condition in. So we'll check if it's equal to. Sometimes it starts very, very quickly with the transcription service. Sometimes not so quickly. It depends how many transcriptions you get up there. We need to do some housekeeping as well, and we'll do that at the end. So we're going to check if the transcription status is equal to not started. And if it is, we're going to use another HTTP action to get the transcription. So what we're going to do, I'm skipping ahead a bit too much. We're going to do that until we're going to get this transcription, check the status, and then get it and check it again until it is no longer in that status. So we'll put a do until action and say the transcription is, I noticed recently in for you to click to advanced and then back to basic to get access to this bit. We're going to run this until it's not equal to as well, not started. And the first thing we'll do within that do until is get the transcription. And again, we use an HTTP request action to do that. We're sending a request to the REST API, and the details of that, again, are back to our documentation, which is very good. And it's in the Swagger document. You'll be able to find the GET request, and it's GET transcription. And all you need to do to get that, again, it tells you exactly what you need. You just need the endpoint followed by the ID. And you need a header as your subscription key. You don't need any body. Now, luckily, if we go back to our response from the create subscription, we get the endpoint followed by the ID in there. So that's just that self property that we need to use in our HTTP request. And it's a get. Now, notice there's two cells here. This relates to the different nodes in here. If I was to choose the second self here, it would automatically create a do until action. But because we're going for the first one, it shouldn't create one. And that's how we know we've got the right one. And I need that there. Again, we're just copying and pasting really from the documentation. And we don't need any body. So we're going to get that. Again, we'll use the parse JSON action. But before we do that, we're just going to do exactly the same again. We're breaking the problem down into smaller chunks. We've created the transcription. We're now going to go and get it. But in order to know how to deal with the response, we need to view that response. And we need this sample to parse the JSON. We get the sample again just by creating a quick compose action. And the body. Let's just rename that so that it means something. Okay, and we'll run a test on that again. we go into the do until now, hopefully. So let's have a look. We've got successes, which is good. And again, I always just create a new file so that I've got them there and I can refer to them at any time. So yeah, so see we get the similar thing to the response, we get self, the channels, and we get the status. So then we're going to go back to our doing while, do until. Let's edit our flow again. Oops. Get rid of our compose. And we will set the variable. So we're going to parse the JSON first so that we can get to each of the nodes again here. Generate from sample again. And it's just repeating the same process for each of the new requests that we use. Let's set the variable status. And it's the status one we want again. So we'll set the variable, then we'll check the variable. If it is still equal to not started, I put a delay in. For this example, I'm only going to put a 30-second delay. I usually put in real world scenario, I've usually put a minute, just to wait a minute and then check it again. I notice if you don't put a delay in, it'll just sometimes, it depends on the length of your audio file, but it'll just check it loads of times. And I know you can increase your limit, but I like to just put a delay. There's no rush to get these transcriptions, sorry, this audio transcribed. So I'll put a delay of 30 seconds in there. We know this file's short. As far as performance goes, I find that it's about a minute per minute of audio it takes to transcribe it. This is a really short one, 44 seconds long, so it shouldn't take any more than a minute. But I put a delay of 30 seconds in. So we're going to delay for 30 seconds if it's not started, and then keep doing that until we get it to this date is changed. I won't do that because then we'll turn out waiting. So I'll move on to the next check that we need to do. And that is the next status. And again, this is all from the documentation and analysing those responses to the actions that we've got. The next status is running. So our next step after this condition is another condition. And because we're updating the transcription status as we go, we'll check whether that's equal to running. And it's pretty much just a repeat of this do until here. So we can copy that. And then change that to running. Again, we're getting a transcription. We are self stays the same, the URL, the endpoint's the same. The JSON's the same. We want to change this body here because we want to use the body of this step, not the previous step. I've learned from a mistake there and saying, why does it keep saying not started? We're checking I've got, again, making sure we're using the right status and not one from a previous step. This is the danger you get when copying and pasting stuff. Running, and we'll delay for 30 seconds again. We'll do that each time. So what will happen next? If it's not running, if it's not starting, then its chances are it's running. If it's not running, then it's either going to be successful or it's going to fail. Once I've created the transcription, I've never had it actually fail on me, which is again, and the audio files that we've been running this for a good year now, and I've never had it. I've sometimes failed when creating the transcription for whatever reason, but if the transcription has been created, I've never had it fail on me, which is, I think that's quite awesome, to be fair. So the next step we have to do after we've checked that it succeeded, let's just rename these so that we can see our steps clearly. Oops. Check ruining. So we're going to check if the jobs succeeded. Another condition, and status. Again, the thing to watch here, because I'm running through this, you need to check that you're naming using the correct actions. Well, you're getting it from the URL, so it should be much the same. If it's not succeeded at this time, then it will have failed. So we'll just terminate the flow with an error. And if it is completed and it's succeeded, then we'll carry on. And the next step that we need to do, because we've got a transcription now, the transcription is completed. We need to get the files, because those files are stored in Azure Blob Storage again. It's not the same Azure Blob Storage that we created where audio file is stored somewhere else. I don't really know where it is, to be honest, but we've got a URL. If we look at our responses here, we've got this files URL here, and that's where our files are stored. So we can use, again, just go back to the Swagger documentation, and if we do get search for files, get the transcription file or files. Now this has actually changed recently. The API version has been upgraded, so this bit was quite new to me recently. But essentially, yeah, you're just hitting that URL, and we'll look at what the response we get once it's hit. Again, same as we did before. We'll do a compose, and then we'll take the response of it and put it into VS Code. So we'll do another HTTP action. Get the files. The method is a get. The files URI is that one. And again, we just need our subscription key in there. And do we need a body? We don't need any body at all. We're just going to get the files. So we'll add another compose step in here and run through it and see what happens. I'd say it's quite a short audio file, so it shouldn't take too long to run. While that's doing that, does anybody have any questions? Has anybody used this cloud services before? I mean, if not, then you should, because it's awesome. This is when this is a drum roll. I do have a backup, so if this doesn't work, I'm building it live. I've got one I made earlier that I can show you that I know works. So let's have a look at what's happening here as well. So we've got the transcription, 2 attempts, again for a 44-second audio clip. That's about right. We're waiting 30 seconds. It's in the next, so the transcription started, and we're polling to see whether it's running or not now. As I said, and again, I've only used clips from about kind of 7 minutes to between 7 and 15 minutes, and it's about a minute. I put a minute response, sorry, delay in it, and it is about a minute per minute of audio it takes. But cool, we've got our files, I think. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at our compose again. We'll stick that into, again, one of our tools that we know is right for the job, which is VS Code. That's what we get here. So where are we? Content URL. That's the one that we want, because these are our files. So look at what we've got. We've got the transcription. So it tells you what kind of file it is. That's the transcription, and that's the transcription report. This is where the actual transcription is, and it's the content URL that our files are. Because if you look at that, that's a blob URL there with some IDs, and it's actually provided with the SaaS UI. So it's really helpful. It's helped us along. We don't need to generate a SaaS UI or authenticate or anything. It does all that for you. And there's settings that you can do. You can put on it so that you can specify how long a time that SaaS URL is valid for. But like I said, we're just learning at the moment. We don't need to worry about that. We just want to get the files. So we're looking for this content URL here. That's going to be what we're going to work with next. Again, we'll get rid of that compose. And same again, we're just repeating the same process, but just breaking it down. So we're just going to parse the JSON again of that response so that we can get to all those nodes that contain the information that we want. Again, the sample is that one. And that should give us what we need. So let's initialize another variable because we need somewhere to store this text that we're getting. Just call it text. It's going to be a string, and the value is going to be blank. And we are next going to do, we're going to have a look. So what we want to get is this one here. We don't want the report, we want the actual transcription. And notice that there's 2 of these values here. So that means we're going to have to go into a for each again. We're going to have to check what the kind is. And Power Automate is brilliant. Power Automate just does that for you. If I say do a condition, and I'm looking for kind, which is there, it creates that apply to each for you. So you don't even need to really worry about that. So you know, sometimes if you missed that, you'd be in trouble. Just copy it from there rather than typing it, because I don't trust my spelling one bit. So we're looking for if the kind is equal to transcription, we're going to get the content, because we're not done yet. We need to get the content from that blob, and this is where I hit a bit of a hurdle, because this is really the only bit that isn't in the documentation that I found anyway. It's another HTTP request. I'll be completely honest, I just done this by trial and error. This is the reserve I did for this one. I just thought, I wonder if you get that URL there, then that content URL, it'll work. And I was quite happy to say that it did work. So again, back to Swagger document, we'll just do the same subscription key. I don't think actually you need the subscription key because you've got a SAS URI, but we'll put it in anyway. And the URL is that content URL there. Just get that a name as well. And we'll do the exact same again. We will have a look at what we get. Didn't take too long last time. So as I say, there's repetition, repetition, repetition. You're going to do an HTTP request, analyze the response on your in VS Code, and then we'll parse the JSON to get to all the goodies that response holds. So I think I'm going to go on a wee bit. This is where I start sweating. I did it the first time, so it should do it this time. Cool. So let's see what we've got. Same again. And that's us hit the jackpot. That's us got our text content. So let's have a look at what we've got here. We've got combined recognized phrases. Combined recognized phrases is the whole audio clip combined. So you get the whole speech from Bret the Hitman Hart talking about his WrestleMania 8 success. It's brilliant. You should have a listen to it. It's a great promo. Get a status of success. Like I said, I've never had it fail, touch wood. This recognized phrases one, this is the one that I'm interested in because this is one, but if you put this to a text file, you're just going to get one tile, one big stream of text. We want to make it easier for people who are using the text to read it. And this recognized phrases chops into phrases. So when he does a pause, or starts a new paragraph, it creates another one of these recognized phrases. And again, if you notice, we've got two channels, one for stereo and one for left and one for right for having stereo, because our audio's in stereo. And there are a lot more options. It can actually recognize who's speaking and have multiple speakers. I haven't played with that yet, but it does sound really interesting. So it'll cut it down into, say, if I was having a conversation with my girlfriend Lou, it would split that recording up. Or if Brett the Hitman Hart was having an argument with Shawn Michaels, you'd have one for Shawn and one for Brett. That's a better analogy, probably. So yeah, so we're interested in these recognised phrases, and we're going to just analyse them in Power Automate again, and we're going to just build a text file based on those recognised phrases. So I'll run through this bit because it's really not that. Doesn't really explain much about the Azure Cognitive Services. We'll do the same again, where we parse the JSON again, and one of our favourite tools. Generate from sample. We already have a sample. Just grab that whole lot there, doesn't matter how big it is. Put it in there, and that generates our schema. And we're going to look at the recognized phrases. We're going to check our recognized phrases for channel ID because we don't want two text files. Oops. Sorry. And let's see what one it is we're going to use. We don't want this channel here because that's the first one. That's our combined phrases. We want the one that's in recognized phrases. So if we choose the bottom one, you know you're in the right one because it creates the for each for you. So if our channel is equal to 0, we're just going to one of them because they're both going to be the same. We're going to get this part here. This display is how we're going to, sorry, this one here is how we're going to build our text file, because that display one is all capitalized nice. We want it to look nice for whoever's reading it. So we're going to look for display, and again, that'll go one level down to this NB nest. So we're expecting a do until loop to be created, and that's okay. Let's append string. And we want just check we've got the right display. I think that's the top one. It's not, so we got the wrong one there. Check that combined records. We want to get the recognized. Oops. That. Recognized phrases one. Here we go. So it's this NB in best that we want, and we're going to get the for each. So that what that's going to do is going to for each NB nest append the string to that, and get the next one, append that, and we'll just put a line break in there as well. And all we're going to do with that is save it to OneDrive. You can save it anywhere you want, any location you want, but just for simplicity, we'll just put it into OneDrive. Oops, I put it in the wrong one, sorry. So we built our string in there. Let's put it to create OneDrive and create file in OneDrive for Business. And do display name.txt. The file content will be your var text. And there's one more step you need to do afterwards. I'll just do quickly, and it's delete the transcription. So just a bit of housekeeping. Through an HTTP request, and again, all the information to do delete is on Swagger. You use delete, and you use the self. I'll just get the very first one. And again, put your subscription key in there. And that should be it. So let's run a test and let's see what we get. So again, while this is running, my emphasis here is by breaking it down into the steps that you get, all the information's in the documentation. I've not really, other than looking at the file here and determining what nodes that I need, I've not done that much problem solving. And again, I've just followed the guide and the documentation in the Swagger document, along with the tools, which, as I said, we've got good tools available to us using the HTTP requests, the parse JSON, and the compose actions. We've hopefully used artificial intelligence to transcribe speech to text. And again, these kind of tools, you can do that not just with cognitive services, but any sort of API, just using those kind of Power Automate and those three tools, you can start working through anything, analysing the responses, and again, like I said, doing some cool stuff, which makes you feel like a pro dev, even though you're not really. While that's running, I'll just finish off because I notice I'm going over, and we'll hopefully see that. Well, I'll do my first few slides, then we'll check to see if it's worked. So my last few slides, while that transcribes. So my point of this session was to hopefully encourage people to have a look at those tools and conquer the fear of failure, the fear of, and then get around that excuse of, oh, I just can't do this, because that's what I was like. I was hitting a deadline. I was going, I can't do this. This is a nightmare. And I just thought, you know what? Let's just take a deep breath and conquer the fear. And why would you bother conquering the fear? Well, skydiving, it leads to more opportunities, more jumps, and it leads to more creative jumps, so you can jump with other people. And cognitive services is the same. It leads to more opportunity. You can use cognitive services to build, as Microsoft says, intelligence into your apps. And they're codes for, you don't need to be a data analyst or AI specialist to do that. And there's a lot out there in cognitive services, which I'm absolutely going to explore more on. You've got vision, which is face recognition and all that stuff. Speech, I have done some work already with converting text to speech, which is really cool. I did a cool wee Canvas app, which, well, it's actually a flow that does a model. It puts the file straight in a model-driven app, and then you can use it in a Canvas app and get it to speak to you. So it makes it more accessible. And then you've got a few other ones, Bing search, and I did another one as well with it wasn't me to that, actually. It was the part of the hackathon. Blair did he did a flow which went up and got an image from Bing, which was awesome. So I hope that encourages you to conquer the fear and push forward. We're using Azure Cognitive Services and Power Automate, and let's just see, hopefully we will see an audio file transcribed here in my OneDrive. If not, I'll just produce the one from yesterday and pretend it is. Yeah. Oh, I've got a new one. I've renamed it incorrectly, so we'll download it and rename it and see what's in there. There we go. Let's change that to .txt. there we go. We've got WrestleMania 8 was a successful. Awesome. So yeah, so that's it for me. Thanks for joining. I hope that you took something away from it and it encourages you to use Azure Cognitive Services.